This movie offers a candid and nuanced depiction of a wealthy Brazilian family's breakdown and the broader social issues it reflects. Get your popcorn and let's dive in. We are first introduced to Gene Cavalcanti, a 17-year-old boy living in an affluent neighborhood of Rio de Janeiro. Gene's life is seemingly carefree, surrounded by the comforts of a big, custom-built house with a security system and a protective family. After a long day, he takes a late-night dip in the pool to soothe his fatigue. Soon, we depict him sneaking out of the house, seeking refuge in Rita's presence. Rita is one of the live-in maids in the Cavalcanti household and a key figure in Gene's life. As they share a cigarette, Rita confides in him about her sexual endeavors and offers him a sense of confidence and an outlet for his burgeoning sexuality. Although they never engage in an intimate relationship, they enjoy each other's company, evident when Gene rests his head on her lap. And the following morning, while Gene is losing himself to a deep slumber, his father, Hugo, walks into his room, pushing him to hastily readies himself and kicks off the day by attending his high school on time. He opens up the window and pulls up his blanket, illustrating his strictness and his obsession with discipline. Shortly after, he joins the household staff for breakfast: Rita, the cook Nomia, and the chauffeur Severino. Following a long night alongside Rita, Gene finds himself exhausted, prompting him to fall asleep on the road to his high school. Upon his arrival, Severino alerts him to catch up with his lessons. However, soon, once in the class, and while the teacher keeps calling his name, we find Gene sinking into slumber once again. In a subsequent scene, we find Sonia, Gene's mother, up to her ears, teaching Leah the French language. Much to her surprise when Leah asks her gently to take a rain check on the money from the amount that Hugo borrowed from Wilton. Under immense shock, Sonia flies off the handle, rushing immediately to her husband, asking about the borrowed money from Wilton. Despite initially clamming up, stating that the problem is between him and Wilton under the table, he eventually comes clean with his wife and says that he only needs to settle the score with Wilton. However, Sonia begins to smell a rat regarding the severity of their financial situation. Later that night, gathered around the dinner table, Sonia's frustration is as clear as the day when she suggests firing the driver, urging her son to rely on the bus instead. She even goes the extra mile by extending her suggestion to her husband, recommending he take care of the garden. In addition to saving on food, the dread of losing their wealth creeps in like an uninvited guest. On the other hand, Hugo assures them that they have enough savings and that things will fall into place soon. Shortly after, Gene joins his family. He announces that his friend Roberto will apply for meteorology in the entrance exam, whereas Cachalet has set his sights on economics. Upon questioning him about his choice, Hugo learns that his son has opted for communications, casting a cloud over his mood. Hugo had set the bar high for his son's academic success. He wanted Gene to hit the books and secure a place at a prestigious university. In the ensuing sequence, we find Gene strumming away on his guitar and singing along with his friends until their teacher's arrival. She announces that the government has implemented a quota system to address racial inequalities. One student remarks that the bill aims to address Brazil's historical debt to its slave-holding past. Another student, of Black ancestry himself, thinks that merit alone should count for university entry. However, such implementation could throw a wrench in Gene's chances of admission, thus laying bare his father's concerns. After finishing his classes, Severino is seen accompanying Gene back home. During their journey, Severino initiates Gene into his first sexual experience. He advises him on how to catch girls' attention, sharing tips and strategies gleaned from his own adventures. As the night falls, and while the family is glued to the TV, Gene addresses his parents, informing them that he is willing to hit the town with his friends at a nightclub to enjoy and blow off some steam from the stresses of the week. His father tells him that he will pick him up by 1 o'clock, the modern Cinderella. Despite Gene's insistence on returning home alone, Hugo remains as steady as a rock in his decision, but at least Gene manages to wangle an extra half an hour. Once in the nightclub with his mates, in the vibrant atmosphere, Gene exudes youthful energy as he enjoys dancing and flirting with girls. However, his delight fades away when the agreed-upon time to return home arrives. Outside, we depict Hugo in his car, awaiting his son, when someone prompts him to move over to park his car, a request that makes Hugo fly off the handle. He almost starts a quarrel. Luckily, others intervene to calm the storm. Gene, on the other hand, feels out of place and urges his father to depart immediately. Hitting the road, Gene informs his father that his credit card didn't work. Therefore, his friend Menz picked up the tab for him. Upon learning about the huge amount, Hugo gets worked up, but tries to keep his shirt on. He checks his wallet, but it is missing in action. Therefore, he apologizes and promises to square things up with Men's tomorrow. In the following few moments, they recount how they flirted with the girls, engaging in light-hearted flirting and spirited conversations. After dropping Jean's friends off, Hugo informs his son that he will be riding the bus to the high school starting Monday. Bewildered, Jean questions Severino, only to discover that he decided to take a breather and depart to see his son. Little does Jean know that Severino was given the axe. The following morning, Nomia finds herself left in the lurch, alone outside the house, missing Severino's company. In the meantime, Hugo accompanies his son to the bus station, keeping his fingers crossed from afar. It is the first time he dips his toes in public transport, evoking worries. In the bus, Jean takes a seat next to the window, contemplating the road while riding the wave of a whole new experience. An experience that becomes a gateway for Jean to observe the city beyond his gated community. A mixed bag of fascination and apprehension. Back at the Cavalcanti's household, Sonia decides to tighten her belt and becomes more proactive in dealing with their financial crisis. Therefore, she decides to start working, joining a friend in an upmarket direct sales business, akin to an Avon-like venture. On the other hand, Hugo resolves to roll up his sleeves and take on tasks he previously left to the household staff, starting with gardening. In the few following moments, we find Jean and his friends discussing the optimal universities they intend to pursue. And while Jean is biting into a sandwich, one of his friends throws him a curvy ball, causing the sandwich to fall and stain his clothes. Soon, he picks up the ball and joins the game, pelting the ball back and forth. In the succeeding part, Jean takes the bus next to his friend Roberto. The latter can sense his friend's frustration at being in a co-ed place. In a kind gesture, Jean gives up his seat to a girl standing next to him. In the ensuing few moments, they engage in a conversation, breaking the ice and sharing their experiences about studying in single-gender schools. Shortly after, Roberto makes tracks upon reaching his destination, and Jean takes a seat next to Luisa. They share their aspirations concerning their higher education. Jean learns that Luisa is shooting for the stars with engineering, while he is setting his sights on communications despite his profound passion for music. Luisa admits that she knows Men's from the nightlife. After learning about her favorite place, Jean throws his hat in the ring and suggests making some plans, an offer that Luisa accepts with bells on before she departs. Later that night, while Jean is hitting the hay, his father walks into his room and plants a kiss on his forehead, wishing him luck on the entrance exam the following day. The next morning, we find everyone with their noses to the grindstone, trying to do their best and pass the exam successfully. Faced with some struggles, Jean secretly turns to his friend for assistance, unbeknownst to the invigilators. Later that night, Jean, along with his friends, hits the town and visits the club where Luisa often hangs out. He finds her dancing delightfully. Soon, he joins her. However, his unfamiliarity with the foro dance leads him to step on her toes. Apologizing over and over, Luisa teaches him how to move to the beat by instructing him on the appropriate moves. We catch sight of them cutting the mustard on the dance floor, lost in each other's embrace, with their smiles lighting up the room. Hugo, holding the reins over Jean's life, calls him, putting him on the spot about his whereabouts. Jean informs him that he has already jumped on the bus with Roberto and is on his way back home. Deep into the night, Jean, tossing and turning, visits Rita his port in a storm when he finds himself alone. Her guidance helps Jean navigate through the choppy waters of life and love. He confides in her about Luisa, expressing his attraction to her. Thus, Rita urges him to take the bull by the horns and make the first move. In a bid for support, Jean tries to twist Rita's arm to spend the night with him, aiming to cut his teeth and ensure that his initial encounter with Luisa is smooth sailing. Yet, his dreams are shattered when Rita rebuffs him and shows him the door. The following morning, we see Roberto and Jean making a splash in the pool. Meanwhile, Hugo is out on a limb, reaching for the trees to trim their branches. But his luck runs out as he takes a tumble, sending shivers down the spines of Roberto and Natalie, who rush to his aid. In the meantime, Jean remains in the icy grip of the pool, a stone's throw away, showcasing the great divide between the father and his son. Out of concern about his well-being, Sonia rushes towards her husband to treat his wounds. She soon informs him that she is flying the coop for her new job, reflecting her determination to contribute actively to their survival. She questions Hugo about whether he threw his hat in the ring with a headhunter, but he dismisses the idea, unable to fathom the fact that his CV will be out in the open, marking their bankruptcy. Annoyed, Sonia advises him to bite the bullet and think about his family instead. In the following few moments, we find Hugo having a video call with one of his acquaintances, looking for a suitable job. Hugo worked previously in a bank for 9 years, but when he attempted to run his own fund, he fell flat on his face. The headhunter promises him to circle back within a week with potential offers, a significant shift mirroring his back against the wall situation. Taking the bus after an exhausting day, Jean encounters Louisa, sharing warm smiles from afar. Suddenly, the bus takes a screeching halt, causing people to tremble and stumble. Jean screams loudly at the driver, asking him to slow down, fearing the worst for the safety of Louisa. Shortly after, we catch a glimpse of them on the beach, accompanied by their friends, where Louisa plays the guitar proficiently, striking a chord with Jean, prompting him to sing her praises. Jean questions whether she lives in a favela, as he sees getting off the bus next to a shantytown. However, it turns out that Louisa does not live in the favela, but in a middle-class apartment. After their friend's departure, Jean takes the initiative, passionately kissing Louisa and tenderly holding her face as they share their first intimate moment together. Back home, while having a family dinner, the dire financial situation rears its ugly head. Jean's high school tuition alongside his phone's bill, in addition to Sonia's payment, much to Hugo's frustration. However, his face lightens up when he checks his son's grades, which turn out to be the silver lining, a proud father. Natalie, on the other hand, tries to engage in the conversation. However, they turn a blind eye to her. This disproportionate attention makes Natalie feel left out in the cold, fueling feelings of resentment and jealousy towards her brother, prompting her to storm off. In the ensuing morning, as the rain pours cats and dogs, a man from the labor court arrives out of the blue. Sonia receives him since her husband is sleeping. Upon handing her a paper, her countenance darkens as she learns that Severino is suing them, igniting her fury. Later on, after informing her husband about the legal complaint, Hugo refuses the appeal and signs the paper, believing that the odds are stacked against them since no boss ever wins a labor suit in the country. With no other solution in sight, Sonia settles on using their children's savings to evade possible penalties or potential imprisonment. In the subsequent scene, we paint a picture of Jean in the classroom studying, when Robert suddenly passes him a piece of paper. In it, Menz requests his money from the other day, lighting the fuse of Jean's anger. Following that, on their way back home, we catch a glimpse of Jean and Louisa's devotion blossoming as they share fervent kisses while on the bus. After Louisa's departure, once she reaches her destination, Jean eagle-eyes Severino from the windows and shouts for him, delighted to see him. Severino's role extends beyond that of a mere employee. He is a pillar of strength, a confidant, and friend to Jean. Later on, we stumble upon Jean strumming the guitar in his room when he catches a whiff of an unusual movement. He follows the breadcrumbs to his sister, Natalie, in their parents' room, where he catches her red-handed stealing money from her father's wallet, spinning a yarn about having no allowance for 4 months straight, laying bare her urgent need. When Jean puts his foot down, demanding she return the money, she digs her heels in, urging him to hit the road and inform their father. However, he backs down following Natalie's threat to spill the beans about his nightly visits to Rita. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, we eavesdrop on Sonia and Nomia's confrontation, when the latter admits that the house isn't running out of food only, but of values as well. Curiosity rearing its head, Sonia probes deeper about the bomb Nomia has just opened. Initially clamming up, she finally airs the dirty laundry, revealing that she found a used condom in the garbage the other day, knocking the wind out of Sonia's sails. Rita, on the other hand, leaves to meet her aunt, giving Sonia the green light to snoop around her room searching for evidence. After leaving no stone unturned in her search through Rita's belongings, Sonia discovers a small box under the bed, a veritable Pandora's box where Rita keeps her treasured pictures. Sonia leafs through them one by one, until her eyes stumble upon Rita's pictures, fully nude in her room, adorning her jewelry, a sight that knocks Sonia for 6. Following this eye-opening discovery, Sonia confronts Rita, laying down the law with the unfortunate news of her dismissal. She doesn't mince words, expressing her disappointment with Rita's barefaced behavior. However, she reassures Rita that time heals all wounds, and they may reconcile one day, hoping to keep the lines of communication open. She even goes the extra mile, mentioning if Rita needs references, she can give a ring and Sonia will sing her praises, provided Rita swallows her pride and apologizes. Rita, with her back against the wall, demands pardon, swearing that no one from Sonia's family took her pictures. She soon departs with a heavy heart. In the next scene, we find Jean in the pool, making a splash with his determination to hone his skills and break new ground with better records. Soon, he joins his friends in the changing room. Menz, with a bee in his bonnet, reminds Jean that it has been 3 months and he hasn't seen a dime of his money back, Adding insult to injury for Jean, one of their friends chimes in, saying that Jean's father stole money from his father and then giving him the cold shoulder. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Outraged, Jean flies off the handle and makes a move to strike him. But their friends jump in, swiftly separating them. Later that day, we find Jean and Louisa nestled in the bed, kissing each other with fervent and delicate caresses. Jean tries to deepen their intimacy, but Louisa halts him, mentioning that she is a virgin. Upon questioning him about his sexual experiences, Jean confesses that Severino, his ex-driver, introduced Jean to his first sexual encounter with a prostitute. Thinking it would be better if Louisa were in her position, the couple passionately continues their kiss, with Jean atop her, deepening their connection. Upon learning about Rita's departure, Jean feels a profound sense of loss. He becomes more isolated within the confines of his privileged home, urging him to sleep on Rita's bed, seeking comfort in old memories. In the subsequent scene, the Cavalcanti family arranges a get-together with friends. We see Jean enjoying his time with Louisa, singing and playing the guitar. Soon they gather for a barbecue, with the entrance exam taking center stage. Jean, in an unexpected turn of events, reveals that he is opting for economics instead of communications, much to his father's joy. Addressing the quota system's topic, Louisa passionately defends the racial quota system. She delivers a speech on the history of racial injustice in the country, recognizing this move as a necessary measure to correct racial and social disparities. However, Hugo has dropped his sympathy for it. Triggered by his hostility towards Louisa's firm opinions, their disagreement becomes a heated debate. He likely sees it as a threat to the status quo and the privileges enjoyed by his social class. He goes on with boasting of his achievements solely on the basis of merit, and disputes Louisa's racial identity as black, to which she discloses, to the guests' amusement, that her father is Japanese and her mother is of black ancestry. In the meantime, Jean remains silent and does not defend Louisa, much to her dismay. Shortly after, we depict Hugo assuring Wilton that he will pay him back his money soon, come hell or high water. Wilton suggests selling his house to overcome his deteriorating financial situation, but Hugo turns up his nose at the idea, determined to keep up appearances, even if it means sacrificing authenticity and genuine connections with his family and others. His attachment to the house goes beyond mere material possessions. It represents his social status and identity, and if he ever changes his mind one day, he will sell it for at least $5 million, not a penny less. He takes great pride in his house and emphasizes its good structure, beauty, and the amenities it provides. Therefore, he takes Wilton on a grand tour upstairs. In the meantime, we find Jean and Louisa in his room, discussing his father's harsh words. Jean tries to defend him, saying that his father thinks that people should suffer like he did, a laughable excuse. She accuses him of being cut from the same cloth as his father. Jean approaches her, reiterating that he is entirely different from his father, and expresses his profound love for Louisa. After checking all of the rooms, Hugo tries to enter Jean's room, but finds it locked. He demands that he open it immediately, claiming what he did was disrespectful, but Jean refuses to budge. Ever stubborn and strict, Hugo starts knocking on the door, telling Jean that he won't take no for an answer. Overwhelmed, Jean grabs Louisa's hand, and they immediately leave the house for a motel. Once there, Louisa opens the television, only to be shocked by the sight of a couple making love. We can sense their passion palpable in the air as they reach each other with ardent kisses and passionate touches. However, Jean retreats to the jacuzzi, disrupting their special moment. Louisa soon follows suit in an attempt to have an unforgettable night together, much to her anger and sorrow, when Jean reconfirms her virginity, prompting her to leave him. In the ensuing sequence, we depict Jean hitting the hay, but the reception rings him up for the payment. After feeling the pinch and checking his wallet, he realizes he's not made of money. Faced with this tight spot, Jean makes a run for it. On the other side of the city, Sonia, Lisa, and her friend are found checking on cosmetic products and discussing Rita's wild goose chase behavior, whereas Hugo's eyes catch a glimpse of a mysterious movement on the camera. Jean manages to beat around the bush and enter his own house by jumping the gun over the fence and slipping through the garage door. Meanwhile, Hugo believes that a robber has triggered the alarm and goes on a wild goose chase in search of the intruder. To his surprise, he finds Jean chilling out and drinking beer by the pool, a critical moment that brings things to a head and exposes the underlying tensions within the family. Jean, at the end of his rope with the recent events, flies off the handle at Hugo. He addresses him with harsh words, spilling the beans about his frustration over being strapped for cash to pay the motel or to return Menz's money. He calls into question his father about the dismissal of Severino, whom he considers close to his heart. Jean's outburst lays bare his awareness of their dire financial state and the looming threat of bankruptcy, which Hugo has been sweeping under the rug. The heated exchange comes to a head when Jean's words light the fuse for Hugo to a point where physical violence ensues, and he knocks Jean off his feet. Sonia, catching wind of the altercation, intervenes to smooth things over and de-escalate the situation. In the crack of dawn, Nomia hits the ground running with her daily tasks. However, her back pain throws a wrench in the works. Rita's dismissal leads her to throw in the towel, asking Sonia to sign her papers. Having bitten off more than she could chew with the former's duties and received not a dime from Hugo for 3 months, she decides therefore to work by the hour in another house in the same complex, leaving Sonia gobsmacked. Despite Sonia's pleas and attempts to twist Nomia's arm, the latter stands her ground in her decision. Back to Jean, we see his father cheering him on as he accompanies him to high school, wishing him the best of luck for the entrance exam. Once the exam starts, Jean seems frustrated, lost in a sea of thoughts until he makes a significant decision. He takes the bull by the horns and leaves the classroom, a step towards independence and self-discovery. Meanwhile, Hugo is immersed in reading a newspaper, waiting for his son. Fortunately, he doesn't notice Jean's departure. In the following moments, we join Jean in his journey to find Severino. He boards a van and heads to the station where he last saw his friend. Once he arrives, he questions the station attendant about Severino's whereabouts. Soon, he ventures into an unfamiliar part of the city where Severino lives. This experience is eye-opening for Jean as he encounters a world vastly different from his own privileged existence. It's a place that's vibrant and full of life, but also marked by economic hardship. Upon his arrival in Favela and encountering Severino, Jean embraces him, bursts into tears, and learns with surprise that he lives with Nomia and her 3 daughters, the youngest one being Severino's. On the other hand, Hugo and Sonia are seen worried about their son's safety, unable to locate him. Despite their round-the-clock efforts to reach him through the phone, there is dead silence from the other end. Suddenly, a tense moment unfolds when Sonia receives an anonymous call, claiming her son has been kidnapped. The caller demands a ransom of 20,000 Ries. This news throws Sonia for a loop, especially since they don't have 2 pennies to rub together. Natalie, sharp as a tack, urges them to get down to brass tacks about Jean's appearance, considering the possibility that it might be all smoke and no fire. And indeed, it proves to be just that. In the following scene, we find Severino singing like a lark with people gathering around him in a hopping and happening atmosphere, dancing, and having a whale of a time. Jean catches sight of Rita from afar. He approaches her with a spring in his step, welcoming each other with open arms, and Rita extends an invitation to Jean for a foro dance. Jean is finally able to charm the socks off Rita. They embrace each other and dance like no one's watching, sharing longing kisses and warm smiles. In the final shot, as Rita lies sleeping in bed, Jean gets up at the crack of dawn, plants a tender kiss on her back, then lights a cigarette, sits on the windowsill, and takes in the sprawling favela in front of him. By reaching the end of this inspiring movie, we are left with a significant lesson. We should always strive for self-discovery and maintain the courage to forge one's own path, even when it diverges from societal expectations or family traditions.